Hi there. First week of August, the truncated ending to House of the Dragon Season 2 was followed only 3 days later by a disastrous quarterly earnings call from Warner Bros. Discovery CEO David Zaslav, the parent company of HBO, revealing that they have massive internal problems, which led to all of these episode budget cuts. Ever since then, I've been working on a detailed, long-form, multi-video series going over all of this, that the problems at HBO's parent company, Warner, how this affected House of the Dragon, slashing the budgets, and what might come in the future. Are they gearing up to sell HBO? Are they gearing up to oust David Zaslav as CEO, and if so, when? What conditions are going on here? And there really isn't much other reporting on this other than knee-jerk complaining that, oh, these Hollywood types. No, there are industry problems leading to all of this. Well, last week I made a quick spur-of-the-moment summary of this in text form in a community post on YouTube, and someone screenshotted it and posted it up to Twitter, and it got shared around a lot. And particularly intrigued were Red Team Review and Preston Jacobs talked about what I wrote in their upcoming podcast episode. So I realized if they're remarking on what I wrote about, I should rush out a quick bullet point summary of all of my conclusions to tie in with, because they have a large podcast. Hello, everyone, from their podcast of This Is What I'm Talking About. Keeping in mind that each of these points is a large video unto itself. This is the bullet points version. There are 4 major problems, mistakes, that Zaslav did running Warner Discovery since the merger in early 2022. Well, the first of these is really a broad industry-wide problem: how he mishandled the cable apocalypse. The cable apocalypse of summer 2024. I'm not the person who came up with that name. Basically, the pace at which streamers have been reaching profitability hasn't kept pace with the rapid decline of cable TV. Even though most of the revenue for major media companies such as Disney or Warner actually comes from contract deals they make with distributor companies such as DirecTV or Charter Spectrum. Like when someone buys a cable subscription, the money doesn't go directly to Disney, it goes to Spectrum, the person who sets up the cable package deal. So Disney and Warner only really get money from their contracts. So how are they coasting along these past 5 years, acting as if cable wasn't drastically declining? They just pressured the distributors into paying pre-2019 prices, pre-streaming prices, even though cable subscriptions have contracted by something like a third. Very quickly, very drastically. But it finally reached the breaking point this past summer that all of the distributor companies at the same time revolted because of the writers and actors strikes. It wasn't caused by the strikes, but the pressure of the strikes was the last straw, which is why everything synced up. So that all at the same time, all these distributors, like DirecTV was fighting with Disney this past summer, all of the other ones are revolting and putting their foot down and saying, we can't keep pretending this is going to keep going forever. We can't keep paying pre-2019 prices for cable TV packages. And because this is their primary source of income, because the streamers, even Disney Plus, isn't technically profitable yet. They don't project profitability until 2026. This is a massive problem. An industry-wide problem, admittedly. This isn't just Zaslav. You saw DirecTV fighting with Disney. But more than most, Zaslav really mishandled it. And it came just as several other major failures unique to Zaslav came to a head. Point 2. Zaslav's alleged plan to boost stock prices by slashing budgets. Zaslav slashed budgets everywhere, canceled projects, and in some cases didn't even release finished movies in order to get tax write-offs. Now, admittedly, Warner was heavily in debt when he took over, but after the first year or so, he just kept going to the point of absurdity. And this also angered many creatives, like Christopher Nolan has said he'll never work with them again. Various DC projects that the people said, we're not going to work with them again, or cartoons. So internal politics, that was also a problem of you not thinking about how you're going to work with these people long term. But in theory, as Zaslav presented it, the idea was to cut down their expenses to the point where the company technically breaks even in order to boost investor confidence. So their stock price would increase, people want to buy it again, by sacrificing long-term growth for quick fixes, gutting the funding for long-term projects at DC and Westeros stuff, in order to be able to point at a chart and say, look, we technically reached net profitability, marginally, by like $1 or something, but look, we reached net profitability, please buy our stock. Problem is that investors aren't stupid, and he's not the first CEO who ever tried to do this trick. They could tell exactly what he was doing, and it never worked. In the past 2.5 years since Zaslav took over, Warner Bros. Discovery's stock has dropped by 70%. When he started, it was over $20 per share. Now it's down to around $7 or $8 per share. And this was a steady decline, to the point that their stock is now worth a third of what it used to be. This plan was a complete failure, and in many ways never could have worked, but I'll go over that in the full video. Third point, quite separate from that, total lack of oversight for their video game division. Warner is unique in that it's the only major TV and film corporation that still has its own in-house video game studio, Warner Bros. Games. Everyone else sold their rights to third-party, dedicated video game development companies. Case in point, Disney doesn't make its own Star Wars or Marvel video games. It's licensed to EA or whoever. Zaslav really didn't know what to do with a video games division. Why would he? Discovery didn't have video games. So he pretty much ignored it, which means he exerted zero oversight on it. And this led to the colossal mega flop earlier this year of Suicide Squad Kill the Justice League. Now, sometimes when things flop, we have to do the math to try to guess what the net profit loss is. We know the raw spending numbers, raw revenue, but we have to kind of work out, okay, this is what the net profit loss was, like Joker 2, for example, just another flop. No oversight on that. But in case of the video games, we actually did get a report of what the net loss was. Not just, okay, this is the raw revenue, we'll guess how much they lost. There was a report openly saying what the net profit loss for Suicide Squad was. Negative $200 million. This isn't just a flop, this is a mega flop on the scale of the past decade or two. This is in video game history mentioned in the same top 10 lists as the E.T. video game from the 1980s. It was that big of a flop, and the amount of money they wasted on it, restarting it over and over again. Maybe not the worst game ever made, quality has a ton of problems, but in terms of you overspent on this, at best mediocre, actually filled with a lot of problems game, you net lost $200 million, because they exert no oversight. They could actually make something like $5 billion cash in hand by selling their video game division to people who can do better, but Zaslav got it in his head that, like the dad who insists on I can fix my own car and save money, they're convinced this thing will print money if we can get it to work right, and you don't have the resources to run a good video game division, you exert no oversight, and the phrase we hear is toxic positivity. That to Zaslav, the video game division is this magic ball that just does its own thing over there. I don't need to see how it works internally or exert oversight. So he delusionally thinks this thing is going to be minting $1 billion. They're going to do with Hogwarts Legacy 2 is basically already set to become the next Suicide Squad flop. Because we'll turn it into a live service game, even though we don't know how to do that. We don't have the staff capacity for it. Again, whole separate video on that. But it lost them a ton of money. I mean, just in terms of a pie chart, a $200 million loss. Fourth point. Zaslav's failed concept that brinkmanship is negotiation. That he's a petty bully who doesn't realize that bullying and threats only work on people he directly has power over. who are employed by him. It doesn't work on his rivals or people with a stronger hand. A lot of comparisons to Cersei in A Feast for Crows, that she thinks, I will threaten badly needed allies when they don't need me. I need them more than they need me. And this ties back into point one. Remember how I said that all major companies, including Disney, were pressuring the cable distributors to keep paying pre-streaming 2018 prices for their content deals. This was across the board, all companies, but multiple news articles, which I will go over in the full version, have specifically cited Zaslav as one of the worst offenders when it came to this. That he was bullying and threatening distributors. They said we didn't even like being in the room with this guy. He would yell at people like, you need our distribution contracts. And that's just in general with the cable issue. This climaxed this past summer when Zaslav lost the NBA basketball contract for Warner's cable channels. The NBA has been a cornerstone of their viewership for 3 decades. Sports is one of the only things that's still profitable on cable TV. Because from a technical standpoint, you've seen, if you ever tried live streaming sports, the technology isn't quite there yet without freezing. If you ever tried watching House of the Dragon live on premiere night when so many people are overwhelming the server, and, because it's the winter sport, basketball gets almost as much ratings as NFL football, really. American football. So this was a cornerstone of their cable division. It was pretty much the only remaining profitable subsection of their cable division that was carrying all of the rest of the cable division. And he ruined a contract they'd had for 30 years. Well, almost. It was a lower tier. They'd had it for 3 decades, and he's fighting it in court. But everyone agrees from these articles that it's because he threatened them. That they said, look, cable isn't as profitable as it used to be. We're not going to pay as much, and threatening, you're damn right you're going to. And they went, we've lined up a better deal with Amazon. That they've already, essentially Amazon matched Warner's bid. And the NBA said, look, either you pay us more or we're going to Amazon. And Zaslav, from a position of weakness, holding none of the cards, really just threatened the NBA. Then they simply called his bluff. And again, the comparisons to Cersei in A Feast for Crows, that she's utterly dumbfounded when she threatens people she doesn't have power over, and then they call her bluff. Because, well, what are you going to do? I'm going to go and do my other thing. That the surprise he had when the NBA called his bluff is what's amazing. So these are the 4 problems they've had. I've gone over in about 12 minutes. And this will be like 2 hours of content going over news articles and stuff of what went wrong behind the scenes. But this is how Zaslav ran the company into the ground. The key point here I want you to remember is that there are 2 scenarios for Zaslav, neither of them good. The first is that he was really just this bad at running Warner Discovery with stupid plans for the past 2 years that didn't work and never could have worked. The second scenario, unproven but increasingly plausible, is that he really was just a corporate raider who bought Warner intending to just gut it and resell it to someone else. Resell it to Disney or Amazon or something. There are 3 things which might indicate that Zaslav really was just gutting Warner Brothers Discovery. And maybe not from the beginning, but at least from the past year or so. Maybe he gave up halfway through, we're not sure, but things that have recently happened. Well, point 1, I mentioned how Zaslav's stated plan was that all these budget cuts were so they could technically break even, point to those charts, boost investor confidence, which is just playing with numbers. It's an old trick, investors didn't fall for it, it didn't work, stock dropped 70%. Well, not only did this plan not work, it could never have worked. This was the first year that specifically just their streaming division technically broke even. And when you look at all the news articles about this, which I'll go over in the full version, you see them stressing, look how our streaming division broke even. And don't look at the man behind the curtain, that even though it was this relatively small breaking even $150 million profit, That's compared to how Netflix turned a corner and last year posted real profit of $7 billion with a B. So it's not that profitable. It's like 0.15 billion to their 7 billion. And Disney isn't even artificially rushing. Disney has openly said we don't expect Disney Plus to be profitable until 2026, 7 years after it launched. Now consider, how much money did they save by cutting the last 2 episodes of House of the Dragon Season 2 at the last minute? It's usually $20 million per episode. It is an expensive show, but it would be a big final battle. So combined, let's say, I think a good guess is they might have saved $50 million by cutting that ending. Roughly. I'm not concerned with specifics. My point is just, guesstimating how much did they get back by slashing budgets, slash our way to profitability. We also know they slashed the episode count on The Last of Us Season 2 and a couple of other things that they canceled and so forth. Yeah, you can see how slashing like $50 million off of House of the Dragon could lead to, we had net profitability in the streaming division of $150 million. It's like House of the Dragon made up like a third of that, just cutting the last 2 episodes. My point is that slashing episode counts can only at best affect a difference in the range of $100, maybe $200 million. That's the range we're looking at. But that figure of look how we technically made net profit by cutting spending on episodes, that's just the streaming division. If you look at Warner Brothers Discovery as a whole, the whole thing, the cable division alone had a net loss of $1 billion last year. The combined net profit for, and again, in the full video I go over every division, but cable divisions plus streaming plus movies plus video games, you were well over $1 billion in debt. That was before the cable apocalypse. Now it's up to $10 billion with a B, of which they stated $9 billion is because we lost those cable distributor contracts we're trying to get back. And they probably will get them back by next year. But the point of all this is, you can't fudge the numbers on the scale of $1 billion. That, okay, we'll cut 2 episodes, get back $50 million, do that for 2 or 3 shows. You can kind of play with the numbers to get your, specifically just your streaming division, net profit $150 million. Though $50 million here, $50 million from the next show. You cannot sweep under the rug a $1 billion debt for your cable division. So arguably this could have never worked because the investors, even if who did recognize this as a trick, you're just playing with the numbers for the streaming division, also said, on top of this, we can tell that Warner Discovery as a whole, including the cable channels, the movies, is not profitable. You're $1 billion lost the past year. This is too big to hide. So it raises the question of, did Zaslav ever truly think investors would be fooled by this? Either he was genuinely that stupid and surrounded by yes men telling him this is a perfect plan, or it raises the possibility, was this just lip service and a token, story, while his real goal was to gut the company for resale? That it's possible he knew, and this was just an excuse, that it was, oh no, we're slashing our way to net profit, was really his excuse while he was gutting spending to resell it. Now I have to stress, we can't rule out that he's just plain that stupid. Other magazine articles are going to talk about that people, anonymous sources who work with him, say he's like in this fog surrounded by yes men, again, not unlike Cersei in A Feast for Crows, that he just seems to think this is a viable plan. So I said there were 3 things. First one is this plan was so ridiculous that it never could have worked, leading you to wonder if, did he ever seriously intend it to work, or was this just, cover story? Second thing, indicating Zaslav might not really be trying to build up Warner, but to sell it. In the aftermath of the August 7th quarterly earnings call, there was another article breaking things down by the numbers, which revealed something which totally shocked me. That, keep in mind, I've been following this closely for years, but I'd never heard this detail at all before. While Warner Discovery still has a lot of inherited debt going back to the old Time Warner era before the merger, back before 2018, a lot of this is inherited debt. And they've managed to reduce it somewhat. So now we've heard the current debt is in the range of $37 to $40 billion. Down from $50 billion, but around $37 to $40 billion in debt right now. Articles that came out since that quarterly call revealed it turns out most of all of that $40 billion of debt isn't actually due for about 15 years. Or more, in some cases. That they're tied up in long-term loans. For that matter, they're the kind of loans that have locked-in interest rates, so they don't change over time. So there really isn't an immediate panicked need to pay off all of this debt as soon as possible. You see, up to now, I thought, wow, Zaslav must be frantically slashing all these budgets because, the debt collectors are banging at the door. That's not the case at all. He could be doing what Disney is doing, patiently setting up stable growth, building up the phases, we must respect the phases, building up long-term franchises, saying we don't even plan on openly telling their investors we don't think Disney Plus will be profitable until 7 years after it launched, because we're slowly building it up and this is the rate at which people are subscribing to it. And knowing that the audience switch over from cable to streaming is going a bit slower than expected. Instead, Zaslav put forward this alleged scheme of we need to immediately break even to restore investor confidence so it will boost our stock values. That didn't work, probably never could. Why the rush? Why the rush for debt that isn't due for 15 years? Disney is looking ahead to will be profitable like 5 years from now. He could have easily had a 5-year plan to profitability, and there is no debt crisis. It's due 15 years from now. Possibly, there is a reasonable explanation is maybe he just got convinced that, we're going to generate money indirectly from our stock prices going up. That he might be convinced that we make money from our stock value going up. I can't rule out he's that stupid. But, third thing that might indicate that he's planning to gut and resell the company. Recent comments, this is the most recent thing, recent comments he made at the Sun Valley Media Conference. It's a big conference by media moguls and top showrunners held at this retreat in Idaho every year, the Sun Valley Conference. Back on July 10th, at this conference, about a month before the earnings call, David Zaslav did an interview with Bloomberg News. And when he was asked about the upcoming U.S. presidential election, Zaslav responded, quote, "We just need an opportunity for deregulation, so companies can consolidate and do what we need to do to be even better." From this, it seems that Zaslav might be looking forward to try to resell Warner Brothers Discovery, but only after seeing the results of the upcoming U.S. presidential election. That he either hoped or planned that the Republicans will win, because they support deregulation, which would mean a lot less red tape if he tries to sell to another big company. Disney, Amazon, whoever. And to be clear, this isn't a moral judgment. This is normal practice for major companies. It's a pattern that's been going on for decades. It's just common sense. Big companies anticipate attempts at big mergers and acquisitions during pro-business Republican administrations. This is normal. Disney bought Fox in 2016 after Republicans got presidency in Congress. This is normal. You'd expect them to do this. If Warner was profitable, you'd be expecting them to look forward to a Republican victory to try to buy what's left of Paramount. This is common practice. If we just lay out the timeline of events here, however, you can see, Zaslav started Discovery's acquisition of Warner in mid-2021. It was finalized by early 2022. So think of the context in which he started doing this in summer of 2021. The Democrats had only recently managed to squeak back into power by a razor-thin margin, and all major political pundits mid-2021 were predicting a strong chance that the Republicans would get the presidency back in the 2024 election 3 years from then. Heck, they even predicted at the time, mid-2021, they predicted a red wave in the 2022 midterm elections for Congress. And it seemed probable from polls and things that the Republicans would win large majorities in both houses of Congress again. But then that red wave didn't ultimately happen. It was only a trickle. It was blunted. Everyone generally said it was a failure, that no, that this is the Democrats had one of the best performances by an incumbent party in decades. But think back to the mentality, the mindset, the context. Zaslav made that decision. I'm going to buy Warner, merge it with Discovery mid-2021. It looked probable that the Republicans would be in power in 2024 again. So maybe this was a calculated bet he made. Problem is that he said all of that in the context of this. On June 27th of this year, President Biden performed very poorly in the first presidential debate. I mean, he was obviously sick. And the man has a stutter, but it led to open questions about his long-term health. He's 81 years old. And I think even if he's okay now, what'll he be like 2 years from now? So for most of July, there were all sorts of polling predictions that Biden would lose the upcoming election. So Biden gave that bad performance at a debate June 27th. 2 weeks later, July 10th, Zaslav felt confident enough to remark in that Bloomberg interview that I'm looking forward to a candidate winning the presidency who supports deregulation for mergers and sales and acquisitions. And this has led me to theorize that while it might not always have been part of his plan, maybe he just gave up on the merger a year ago. He just wants to cash out at this point. Who knows if he was always thinking this, but particularly now, I speculate that Zaslav is waiting to see which party wins the U.S. presidential election. And if the Republicans do, he's going to try to flip Warner, try to resell it to another big company after he spent 2 years gutting all of our projects, all of our core franchises that we love. If that was Zaslav's plan, if he was feeling pretty confident about that first week of July after the bad presidential debate, a month later, by the first week of August, it had all fallen apart. Because 11 days after he said that in Bloomberg, on July 21st, Joe Biden took one for the team and dropped out of the race rather than risk his party losing the presidency. 4 days later, on July 25th, is the day the NBA called Zaslav's bluff and refused to renew their contract with him, a massive blow to the company and its reputation. Then, instead of a confused, protracted fight over the Democratic candidacy, some thought you might even see a convention floor fight for the likes of which we haven't seen in 50 years. No, in short order, Vice President Harris soon secured the nomination. Very orderly. There wasn't really that much debate. On August 5th, the internal nominees, because it is a combined ticket when you vote for Biden in the primary, you technically vote for Harris in case he drops out. So it was all pretty straightforward. And by August 5th, Harris had officially secured the nomination. The day after House of the Dragon Season 2 finale. It was that Monday. Then 2 days later, August 7th, was Zaslav's disastrous quarterly earnings call. Not just that Warner Brothers Discovery had a bad quarter due to ripple effects from the strikes, but this stunning revelation that none of his plans the past 2 years have been working. So think of just how quickly Zaslav's situation turned around from the first week of July to the first week of August. It went from a Republican victory apparently likely, now an entirely new candidate recharging the Democratic ticket. It's going to be very close, but it's really, no one is saying, compared to the first week of July where it seemed extremely likely the Democrats would lose. And now projections saying Harris will probably win by a close margin. We shall see what with all the swing states and the numbers game. But I don't think Zaslav had a fallback plan. That's what I detest the most, where you just gamble everything and you don't have a fallback plan in case it doesn't work. No fallback plan in the case of a Democratic victory. That he took a gamble, bet it all on the Republican victory. So my speculation, and this is speculation from all of this, is that after that terrible August 7th quarterly earnings call, with presidential election only 3 months away, the Warner Discovery Board of Directors, who represent the shareholders and do technically have the power to force him out as CEO, I think they sat down and said, look, there's a big presidential election 3 months from now. We might as well adopt a wait-and-see attitude. Just common sense. This isn't some elaborate theory. It's just 3 months out from an election, let's just wait and see what happens. It'll change the game anyway. Therefore, I think Zaslav's last plan, particularly at this point, maybe not last year, but definitely now, is he's hinging his future on a Republican victory. Because at this point, he has no serious intention of rebuilding Warner Discovery. If he did, even in this spring, the events of this summer mean he wants to cash out. Because his job is to make money for the shareholders, and if Republicans win, there's no red tape, and he's allowed to resell Warner Discovery to another megacorporation, he will technically make money for everyone, and he won't be fired. He'll walk away with money, the shareholders will get money, all be well. If the Republicans do not win on November 5th, and they won't be able to easily resell Warner Brothers Discovery, if the Democrats win the next election, I think there's a good chance that the Warner Board of Directors will openly turn on Zaslav. Vote him out before New Year's Day. Again, it's a chance. It's not necessarily true. Maybe they're cowards. Maybe they don't. But there's going to be a real chance of a real push to get him removed if the Democrats win. The hope is that they replace him with someone who reverses his crazy budget cuts and instead lays out these long-term growth plans on the scale of 5 years until profitability, and restores the budget to projects on their core franchises, like uncanceling certain DC Comics projects, or I don't know, giving House of the Dragon 10-episode seasons again. If Zaslav is ousted, his replacement will probably restore the budgets, and Zaslav will most likely be ousted if the Democrats win the next presidential election. This is all conditional, of course. But, businesses tend to try to mount major mergers and sales during Republican administrations, don't have as much red tape. Even if he tries to sell it, sales take time. And they wouldn't be spending more on Westeros projects in the next year or two while they're pushing it forward. That won't save House of the Dragon Season 3. The timeline isn't there. But because House of the Dragon Season 3 starts filming next spring, if they oust Zaslav by New Year's, a new interim person could plausibly rush in and restore the budget on all these projects in time for Season 3. Maybe. None of this is certain. I'm not trying to sell you snake oil here. It's just a theory. And maybe it won't even work even if he gets ousted. But it'll be something that it cannot be an accident that their next quarterly earnings call is scheduled for November 7th, 2 days after the presidential election. They're waiting to see how the election goes. And if the Democrats win, Zaslav will be in serious danger of a revolt by the shareholders and board of directors. It's just a prediction. We have to factor in human stupidity and cowardice. Maybe they won't ultimately go through it, not acting in their own best interests. But if they are rational actors, keep an eye on this. This is what they've been waiting for ever since the disasters, those combined disasters, first week of August, of this truncated House of the Dragon ending really upsetting everyone. Then 3 days later, hi, not only are we $10 billion in the hole, none of my plans these 2 years have been working. This is admittedly the short version. It's 30 minutes long. This is like 3 hours worth of video that I've summarized in half an hour now of what I think is going to happen. So please like and subscribe. Stick around for, if you're not totally convinced, the longer version is me going over each point, slowly reading off news articles and with specific numbers and quotes and citations. But it just seems common sense that if there's going to be a shakeup at Warner Discovery after massive problems on the scale of what they had last quarter, there'll be a shakeup after the presidential election. We shall see.